Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Recently, Canis 2020 submitted the following question. What would have happened if the Jedi did not engage in the war like they did in the Clone Wars, but instead stayed true to their goals and values by helping those in need and focusing on the Force? This is a really fantastic question, Canis, because the Jedi Order blindly accepting those commissions on behalf of the Grand Army of the Republic was really the final act of an organization that had been in decline for decades. The Republic and the Jedi have a long and complicated history and relationship that for the most part was built on mutual trust and cooperation. But there always remained a firm separation between the Jedi and the Republic government, allowing for ideological differences and disagreement to test that relationship, but never sever it completely. During the Old Republic period, for instance, there was a crisis in the Outer Rim, and this was caused by a bunch of Mandalorians who had started a crusade against their neighbors. At first, they targeted non-aligned worlds, and then Republic border worlds. And then finally, the Mandalorians attacked Taris, a seminopolis in the Outer Rim of great importance that the Republic could no longer ignore. This was known as the Mandalorian Wars. The Jedi at the time were conflicted on what to do. You have a younger faction of activist Jedi who were moved by the scenes of massacre on Taris, the complete genocide of the Cathar race. They wanted to intervene. This faction was known as the Revanchists, which I always thought was named after their leader, Revan. But actually, later on, I found out that Revanchist just means an individual who supports a movement to retake lost land or lost political power. Also, the word Revanchist comes from the root word revanche, which means revenge, which is not a very Jedi-like quality. The establishment Jedi were far more cautious. Members of the High Council, like Master Vrook Lamar and Vandar Tokar, still remember the Great Sith War against Exar Kun 40 years earlier. And last time around, the Mandalorians were used as shock troops to degrade the Republic's defenses. What made that conflict so dangerous is the fact that many Jedi also defected and joined Exar Kun, creating a theological crisis that was far more dangerous in the eyes of the Jedi. Remember, the Jedi were definitely peacekeepers, but they were also waged in this battle in the Force against the dark side, which was considered their primary role and duty. And so the Jedi Order of this period basically sat out the war, aside from the Revanchist faction. And the Jedi weren't trying to be callous or take some pacifist stance. It was a strategic move. They wanted to wait and see if an invisible Sith hand emerges guiding the latest Mandalorian crusade. At the same time, they also wanted to prepare their organization for war when it does come to that, especially if some secondary Sith invasion happens using the Mandalorians as a distraction. Patience, wisdom, pragmatism was not enough to stop the Revanchists and their very charismatic leader Revan from entering the war on the side of the Old Republic. As usual, it was the young, passionate, but inexperienced fighters who were eager to join the fight, and what a fight it was. If you think the Jedi fighting droids was violent during the Clone Wars, imagine how horrific it was for the Jedi to fight a warrior race like the Mandalorians, who spent their entire history developing weapons and tactics to kill the Jedi. The less skilled Jedi perished quickly, and the ones who survived were tainted by the darkness of conflict of having to kill sentient beings with their own hands. That was something the Jedi didn't have to really deal with during the Clone Wars, and had, Palpatine been smarter and used less droids and sent more, separatist aliens and humanoids to fight the Jedi, I think the Jedi would have lost a lot more of their members to the dark side. So that is the precedent as far as our scenario goes with the Clone Wars. In many ways, the Clone Wars was far less justified conflict for the Jedi to join. This was mainly a civil war, a war of secession by a few hundred star systems that disagreed with the central government. And the real reason why the Jedi joined the Republic forces during the Clone Wars is because the Jedi had been complicit in creating this environment. I mean, they had supported the Republic blindly now for decades, and this was kind of like, this was the last step for them to really fully merge into the Republic system. You see, in the decades leading up to the Clone Wars, Palpatine and more importantly his master Darth Plagueis, who totally didn't kill himself, guided the galaxy to depend more and more on the private sector for governance. The free trade zone was really just the crown jewel of this political shift. Centuries earlier, during the High Republic period, you still had energetic chancellors who were willing to spend massive amounts of resources, manpower, and political capital to develop infrastructure in the Outer Rim. By the late Republic period, most chancellors were too busy fighting political wars with the opposition and delegated this responsibility of developing the Outer Rim to corporations. But since the Jedi ultimately served the Senate, when the Senate is captured by the corporations, the Jedi also started serving the corporations. The Jedi of this period used to have outposts all across the galaxy, as we see in the Acolyte, which occurs directly after the High Republic period. With the devastating conflict against the Nile eroding trust in the institutions, with corporations demanding more support and grabbing more power within the Senate, this led to the Republic pulling back Jedi peacekeepers from unimportant worlds that didn't have lobbyists or large industrial and economic footprint. In the last few decades of the late Republic era, the Jedi basically withdrew from the Outer Rim and the Mid-Rim and the Slice, mostly at the behest of leaders like Finis Valorum, who of course was being guided by Sith Lords like then Senator Chief Palpatine. The Jedi went from protectors of small little villages, a sign of local peace and stability and one of the greatest deterrents against crime, to bodyguards for corporate leaders, enforcers of corporate action. They even helped negotiate mergers and acquisitions. They even helped break apart labor movements. Some Jedi, like Dooku, grew increasingly dissatisfied at what the Jedi become and left the Order. But at this point, the Jedi were so deeply involved in the day-to-day struggles of the Republic political world that they had essentially also been captured as well. Now, for our scenario to work, for the Jedi to actually sit out the Clone Wars, the Jedi would have had to make moves decades before the conflict even started, because again, by the time the Clone Wars started, there was very little they could do to avoid the conflict. And I think the perfect moment for the Jedi to turn their ways around is outlined in the book The Living Force. The year is 33 BBY, and the invasion of Naboo happened just the year later. At the time, the Jedi, as mentioned, is shutting outposts all across the Outer Rim, and particularly in parts of the galaxy known as the Slice. This is where some of the oldest hyperspace lanes in the galaxy were built. There are thousands of manufacturing and industrial worlds in this area, in serious decline because of this shift to the Outer Rim. This is very much the Rust Belt. We have crumbling infrastructure, declining population, and not enough resources and tax revenue to actually stimulate things and build something. The withdrawal of Jedi peacekeepers and the closure of the outposts in this area is really the last nail in the coffin. After their departure, pirates, gangs, and other large criminal enterprises started filling in the void, scaring off what few corporate entities were still investing in this region. In the Living Force, the Jedi are drawn back to a world known as Quen in the Castellar system. Quen was originally a gem-rich world which suffered from overmining and resource extraction. During the High Republic Grand Renewal Project, Quen was chosen for redevelopment, and so a lot of the pollution, a lot of the scars on the surface of the planet were removed, and they actually terraformed the planet. They created these large new cities, these mountains that rose above the oceans, and this is where a lot of the new inhabitants who immigrated to this planet would live, because they also designed a large starport to increase commerce and traffic. The renewal of Quen was a great victory for the High Republic and the Jedi Order. It proved that the Republic still had the ability to improve the lives of the individual. Jedi Master Obo Rances had been one of the individuals placed in charge of this program. And now in 33 BBY in Quen, the situation was deteriorating. As mentioned before, the Jedi withdrawal led to an increase in crime, and that led to corporations also packing up on the world and abandoning their investments there. The Jedi Order was facing its own crisis of faith, as many in the ranks had begun to realize how far removed they were from their original task of serving the people. Individuals like Dooku had already left almost a decade earlier because of this change in focus. The Jedi were actually due on the world of Quen to celebrate the bicentenary of the Great Renewal program. And, you know, when they arrived, they saw how terrible things were. They got to work pretty quickly. And a lot of these Jedi started reconnecting with the joy of actually helping people, helping individuals that they can see and touch and talk to. Many Jedi during this operation, individuals like Mace Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Yoda, started opening their eyes to the reality of what the Jedi had become. They were no longer serving the people, they were serving the elite policymakers, the corporate leaders of the galaxy. And in our scenario, it's at this point, while working in the Slice, the Jedi realize they have essentially abandoned the people of the galaxy. This is all a part of the Sith plan, of course, to create so many problems, so much chaos, that the Jedi would be forced to focus on the macro instead of smaller issues. But the Jedi, after Quen, realized that the Jedi never belonged in politics, because by its nature, such leadership positions desensitize a person to the suffering of the individual. Getting involved in politics led the Jedi to fear the Republic's enemies. It led to their desire for power and control. It also inflated their egos and diluted the purpose of the Order. Grandmaster Yoda ends up recalling the entire Jedi Order, not to the temple, but to Quen, to see all the work they have done, and he announces a new Great Renewal. This time, the Jedi are going to lead a mission to bring peace and prosperity to the Outer Rim by simply just being there. The Jedi would reopen the hundreds of abandoned outposts they left behind, and within a month, public sentiment begins to change drastically about the Jedi, as their actions, while limited locally, breeds a sense of optimism and hope all across the galaxy that no one had seen in many centuries. Former Jedi Master Dooku, who at this point has not taken the final step towards the dark side, is intrigued and follows these developments from Serena. He even visits the local Jedi post in his area, and he likes what he sees. This is a new Jedi Order, very different from the one he left. At the same time, the events that lead to the blockade of Naboo by the Trade Federation still happens. Finis Valorum needs to raise more tax revenue in order to fund his bloated government, and his Proposition 31814 still ends up passing. It brings taxation back to the Outer Rim, which of course infuriates entities like the Trade Federation, whose entire business model is built off of exploiting the free trade zone. Valorum's move is well-intentioned, but done far too late in the game. The Trade Federation has amassed great political and financial power when it invades the tiny world of Naboo. Its corporate allies in the Senate block any meaningful response from the Republic. Finis Valorum still sends Jedi to the planet to negotiate, but this time he sends individuals from the local Jedi outposts. These Jedi have far more ties to the local population and are far more aligned with their interests. The Trade Federation still tries to kill them as they are aligned with the Sith, but this leads to outrage and condemnation not just by the Republic but by the people of the Mid-Rim and the Outer Rim as well, who see the Jedi as defenders of the public and not just some servants of the Republic. Queen Amidala still flees the planet looking for more help and aid, but instead of traveling to Coruscant, she ventures to the world of Quen, where the Jedi have now set up their base for operations. Queen Amidala maintains contact with Senator Palpatine, who is instructed to find a political solution within the Senate. Meanwhile, her Jedi allies on Quen have a pretty interesting idea that could save her world. You see, after just a year of returning back to their roots, the Jedi have learned a great deal about what was happening to the people of the Outer Rim. The Trade Federation and many other mega conglomerates like this had essentially turned these regions into their own personal fiefdoms. They had control of everything that flowed into these systems. They had price control, they had control on labor costs, everything. They extracted resources without any consideration of local habitats and populations. They were a truly evil force, and now the Jedi, having immersed themselves in the problems of the common man, are kind of forced to do something about this. The Senate will not intervene on behalf of the people of Naboo, who were now starving and occupied. This occupation is symptomatic of a much larger issue facing the people of the region. While the Jedi were uncomfortable with fighting what was technically a legal company with representation in the Senate, they no longer could stand by and be neutral in the matter. While on Quen, Queen Amidala runs into Count Dooku. He's grown quite popular on his native Serrano. After returning home, he had found large reserves of scananium on the planet and increased the wealth of his homeworld. Dooku had been keenly following the events of the invasion of Naboo. He's eager to see his old Jedi Order return to its roots and finally fight for the people. And now he's here to provide the Jedi with a way to fight that still fits their Jedi code somewhat. You see, more than a decade earlier, a group of pirates known as the Star Commercial Combine started targeting Trade Federation ships all across the galaxy. This almost brought the company's operations to a complete halt. The Jedi at the time were brought in to intervene on behalf of the Trade Federation, something that Dooku remembers very well, as just a few years after he leaves the Jedi Order for good. Dooku suggests the Jedi Order, with their fast and light interceptors, could wreak havoc against the Trade Federation's operations by targeting their logistical network. You wouldn't need to destroy or kill anything. Heck, you could just use ion cannons to disable some shipments. But if you disable, just a few dozen, that could really hurt the bottom line for the Trade Federation. The Jedi, sensing gridlock and corruption in the Senate from the Trade Federation representatives, agreed to move on behalf of the Naboo people, who are now on the verge of starvation thanks to the blockade. The first report of Jedi interceptors disabling Trade Federation ships bring outrage to the Trade Federation and its corporate allies in the Senate. But lo and behold, the majority of Republic citizens cheer on this move. For the first time in decades, someone is finally fighting back against this company which was exploiting everyone. They were taking jobs from the core regions and then exploiting people in the Outer Rim. The holonet explodes with stories of the Jedi exploits, and it dominates the news headlines, along with smuggled footage of the Trade Federation occupation in Naboo. The popularity of the Jedi's attack against the Trade Federation gives a lot of senators the political kind of push they need to resist the Trade Federation from a legislation point of view. Large core world planets began discussing the ban of Trade Federation products in their systems and are willing to source them from higher priced areas. You see, democracies might take a long time to get things right, but they eventually get there. The Trade Federation, facing massive pressure that could destroy their entire business model, finally retreat from Naboo. It's a huge win for Finis Valorum. While he was an ineffective leader, he was always closely aligned with the Jedi and a compassionate person. The peaceful resolution of the Naboo crisis solidifies his power. Chief Palpatine never moves Padme Amidala in position to call for a vote of no confidence in the Chancellor. Prop 31814 does exactly what it's supposed to do, which is take massive tax revenue from the Outer Rim. And as the Outer Rim cartels lose their price advantage, more work shifts back to the core regions and Slice, which are geographically closer to their end markets anyway. Much of that tax revenue that was collected is reinvested in the Republic and also given to the Jedi to upgrade their outposts all across the galaxy. Finis Valorum even joins in and creates a parallel Republic development initiative that further supports the humanitarian efforts of the Jedi. Dooku repairs his relationship with the Jedi Order. His apprentice Qui-Gon Jinn never dies. He never ends up killing Yaddle, turning him to the dark side. The Separatist movement doesn't even need to happen in this scenario because thanks to the Jedi outposts in the peripherals of the galaxy, we're starting to see improvements everywhere. Prop 31814 also helps rebalance the galactic economy. It revitalizes declining areas hit hard by the free trade zone. Ultimately, this is really the only way the Jedi can sit out of the Clone Wars, by preventing it from happening in the first place. By the time the Battle of Geonosis starts, the galaxy was already too far gone. The conflict was inevitable. Trust in the institutions, trust in the Republic and the Jedi were at an all-time low. And had the Jedi abandoned their duty to protect the Republic from this threat, Palpatine could have just turned public sentiment against the Order. But in our scenario, the Jedi represent an alternative to the usual levers of power, and they're able to solve this problem of instability and chaos in the Outer Rim in a much more meaningful way than any government institution can. Well, there you have it, guys. That is our video for today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, the democracy. I'll see you next time.